Hi, today's session is about Indian history. The chapter I'm going to discuss is the rise of new religion or rise of heterodox sects, which is basically a chapter dealing with the developments which came after the later Vedic period in approximately 600 BC. Specifically, among the rise of new religion, we will see in today's discussion, we will see what are the causes for it, what were the two new religions which started, which is Buddhism and Jainism, what were the specific features of Buddhism and Jainism. Approximately 600 BC, later Vedic society had become extremely rigid. It had become complicated. It developed into a Varna-based society, but actually a Varna-divided society. So everything was based on Varnic classifications, like Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra being the four classifications, with Brahmana at the highest of the hierarchy and Shudras at the lowest of the hierarchy. And second problem in the later Vedic civilization was there were too many rituals, and particularly for most of the rituals, Kshatriyas had to do the ritual, Vaishyas had to promise in the sponsor the ritual, they had to spend the money, whereas Brahmanas, the priests, always benefited from it in the form of dana and dakshina. Particularly, the concept of dana and dakshina became, from a point of provision to the Brahmanas, by 600 BC, this tradition of dana and dakshina became a point of earning to the Brahmanas using rituals. And Kshatriyas and Vaishyas did not understand, while they sponsor the ritual, while they conduct the ritual, how come the Brahmanas are the beneficiaries of it. The third biggest issue was the agriculture economy. See, in an agriculture economy, as you know that in the later Vedic period, agriculture was the most dominant aspect. In an agriculture economy, it is always the peasant who contributes, who develops, and who's control the entire economies. And still the peasant, being the category of Shudras, was always discriminated. So this new money earning wealthy peasant class did not understand the logic of what makes them to be part of the lower Varna, in spite of they actually being the sponsors of the entire economy. And then sacrificial rituals. For everything, there was a bali, horse sacrifice, go-ghana, which is animal sacrifice or cattle sacrifice. There was always a bali which was required. And this sacrificial ceremonies was making agriculture an expensive tradition, because agriculture and animal husbandry was starting to get impacted because of these rituals. Peasant communities, which had become very rich, which was wealthy, started to question this. And Vaishyas, who were actually the source of economy, because Vaishyas are the traders and they are the ones who bring commerce. And overall, if you see, later Vedic society was a materialistic society, entirely based on new money and new wealth, the Iron Age society. So all the Varnas started to question this, particularly Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas did not understand the logic of ritualism anyway. For example, take 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧 yagam. In 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧 yaga, one of the rules which is there is, once the yaga is done, whatever dana, whatever dakshina the Brahmana asks, the Kshatriya has to give. This may be his kingdom itself. If the Brahmana asks the kingdom, the king is supposed to donate the kingdom. Similarly, Vaishyas, they never understood, they questioned why their value is lower when you compare with the Brahmanas, in spite of they actually being the main contributors of trade and commerce. And this new forms of property, particularly land-based property, this new form of property, like particularly the land-based property, caused a sort of misery and suffering among people who were to a large extent at least landless or those who were discriminated. It is out of these, you can say, social frustrations, social unacceptance and social discrimination that two new religions started in India. Among these two, Buddhism was the largest, most popular, most widely spread as of today. Along with Buddhism, there was also another religion which started, which was Jainism. Point to be noted, Buddhism always started only as a philosophy. It was started by Siddhartha. Only after the death of Siddhartha that Buddhism started to become like a religion. Buddhism was started by Siddhartha. His lifetime was from 563 BC to 483 BC. 563 BC to 483 BC, approximately 80 years. He was born in Gautama Gotra. He was born in Lumbini Vana. Sakya Kshatriya clan. Remember, clan is essentially like a sub-tribe. A clan is essentially like a sub-tribe. Siddhartha's father, Suddhodana, was actually the elected chief of the Kapilavastu state. Now, the word elected chief comes consistently in your textbooks. Elected chiefs happen to be only in the Ganarajyas. Ganarajya is sort of republic, not a monarchy. That is, the king is not coming because of his family. The people select the king. Siddhartha's mother, Mahamaya, she was princess of Devadaha. Most probably she died in childbirth. Siddhartha grew under his foster mother, Mahaprajapati Gautami or Gautami Prajapati. See, there is a slight confusion about which age Siddhartha was married. We believe, according to Anguttara Nikaya and Brihaddara Nikaya, the Buddhist books, Siddhartha was married at the age of 18. His wife was Yashodhara. She is sometimes also referred to as Bhadda Kanchana and Subhadraka. The source for this is Anguttara Nikaya, a Buddhist book. Very important Buddhist book. At a very young age, Siddhartha also had a son. Siddhartha's son's name is Rahula. There is a small backstory to how Siddhartha eventually became Buddha. See, when Siddhartha was born, naturally the practice was people to check the astrology of the newly born. So Siddhartha from childhood had a very, you can say, meditative bent of mind, very deep thinking mind. So his father checked his astrology when he was born. So in his astrology, one of the monks at that time said, Siddhartha was the chosen one. So he would be either a saint, a great saint, or an ekrat. Ekrat means an emperor. So the father was told either he will be a great monk or a great king. Now, as a father, Siddhartha's father, Suddhodana, was very afraid and skeptical about this. So from childhood, he kept Siddhartha in house. From childhood, Siddhartha was never allowed to go out. His education happened inside palace. His life happened inside palace. He was married inside palace. He lived the entire life up to 29 years in the palace. Siddhartha was never sent out. It was only at the age of 29 that he left the household. He went on a trip, came back, eventually became a monk, attained enlightenment. Enlightenment in Buddhism is called nirvana, salvation. He attained this at the age of 35, nirvana, under a peepal tree at Bodh Gaya. This happened after he left the household at the age of 29. Eventually, once he got enlightened, he was given a name, Tathagata, the one who attained truth. The one who attained truth. He was also called Sakya Muni, Sakya being his tribe, Muni the monk of the Sakya clan. Once he attained enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, Siddhartha, along with his students Kaundinya and Tampusa, he went into another place called 𝗖𝗯𝗵𝗃. 𝗖𝗯𝗵𝗃 is in UP. Sarnath Deer Park, UP. It is in Sarnath Deer Park, Uttar Pradesh, those days known as 𝗖𝗯𝗵𝗃, that Siddhartha gave the first sermon. The first sermon. It is called Dharma Chakra Parivartana, means turning of the wheel of law. Turning of the wheel of law. This is considered the most important event in Siddhartha's life. Okay. Quick background to what we've seen till now. Three things are important in Siddhartha's life. Siddhartha's birth, his leaving the palace, and he attaining enlightenment. Three things important. See, in Buddhism, since Buddhism is actually a philosophy, it's actually a philosophy, Siddhartha is perceived in different models by different people. See, he can be a monk, a saint, a philosopher, a teacher, a superhero, it's up to you. Buddhism doesn't prescribe or doesn't limit the definition of Buddha into, say, enlightened guy or a monk or a saint. That sort of definition doesn't come in Buddhism. I'll give you for a small example. Siddhartha actually died due to eating pork. Contrary to the normal belief, you know how Siddhartha is shown like the super monk, vegetarian, Puritan. No, that sort of explanation doesn't fit here. Siddhartha actually died due to food poisoning. He ate pork, the meat of pig, when he visited one of his disciples' house. So Siddhartha doesn't get into a single definition. So in Buddhism, we can't give Siddhartha any one particular definition as a super god, super monk, super saint, nothing like this. He was born to Suddhodana, Mahamaya. Mahamaya died in childbirth. Right? She died in childbirth. So mainly, he was born 563 BC. When he was born, they checked his astrology. It was simply said he is the chosen one. He will be either a great monk or a great king. Father was afraid, so he actually locked him in the house for 29 years. For 29 years altogether, he was in the household. He was inside the house. He was never left out. His father used to show him the palace and used to tell him that everything the light touches is our kingdom. So since Siddhartha was always inside the palace, Siddhartha actually never knew what was old age, what was sickness, what is death. These were unknown to Siddhartha. Siddhartha has never seen these in his life. Death, sickness, old age, he has never seen. Inside the palace only, he got married to Yashodhara. They had a son, Rahula. Eventually, Siddhartha was in the house. Everything was fine. At the age of 29, it was when he was 29 years, Siddhartha asked his father if he could go visit the kingdom outside, because for 29 years he has been inside the palace and Siddhartha was going to be the next emperor of the 𝗕𝗏𝗧 state. So he wanted to know his people and know the kingdom he is going to rule. So Siddhartha asked his father if he could go out. Now father permitted him to go out. At the age of 29, Siddhartha left the household and he went out. He went with his horse Kantaka and his charioteer, that is the guy who drives the horse, Cetaka. With Kantaka and Cetaka, Siddhartha left the house. He went on a trip in his kingdom 𝗕𝗏𝗧. He saw 4 scenes: a sick man, an old man, a dead man, and a saint. Once Siddhartha saw these 4, Siddhartha began to realize that life was much more than his palace, much more than what his father has shown him in the palace, because Siddhartha for 29 years, as I said, was inside the palace. So he has not seen all of this in his life. Now he was seeing these 4 and he was shocked. Eventually he went home and then he left his family life. Siddhartha quit his family life, the event generally known as 𝗪𝗁𝗔𝗧. In English, the Great Renunciation. Siddhartha believed it was now his duty to find out a solution for the problems of the people. So he left the great household and he started to wander. Initially, he became an Ajivika. For a brief period, he believed in a small monkhood called Ajivika Dharma. Eventually, he started to do penance. Initially, he went to Bodh Gaya and he tried to do penance. Penance means tapasya. He tried to do tapasya. Unfortunately, the more he focused, the more he got attracted towards materialism. The more he tried to give up, the more he got attracted towards his wants. That is when Siddhartha's maid, there is a lady called Sujata. This character is very important in Buddhism. Her name is Sujata. She gave Siddhartha the first lesson of his life, that is middle path. She asked Siddhartha to try to attain his salvation while it was within his practical requirements. For example, Siddhartha attempted to do penance without drinking water and without eating food. So she questioned him, saying, what is the use of attaining salvation if you are dead in the process? So Siddhartha got his first lesson called Madhyama Marga. Madhyama Marga is middle path, which was given to him by his maid Sujata. And see, this Madhyama Marga is the central core pillar of Buddhism. Buddhism neither wants its followers to become monks, neither wants its followers to become too much into materialism. It is somewhere in between, neither extreme happiness, neither extreme salvation. It doesn't approve this, it doesn't approve this. Madhyama Marga is middle path. That this became the central core of Buddhism, and this is what brings Buddhism as a practical religion. Buddha also himself relied on this. See, Buddha never talks about things like gods, goddesses, world, universe, Atma, Paramatma. He doesn't get into all these discussions. Buddha tried to solve the practical problems of the day, those which can be solved within the day. Eventually, with following the path of Madhyama Marga, Buddha attempted a 49-day penance. After 49 days penance, at the age of 35, 6 years after leaving the house, 6 years after leaving the house, Siddhartha attained salvation and he became Buddha. Buddha, the awakened one, at the age of 35. Now this happened under peepal tree at Bodh Gaya, Bihar. This tree is there even today. Bodh Gaya, Bihar, that is the tree. From there, along with his followers, he went to 𝗖𝗓 Patna, the Sarnath Deer Park in UP, and that is where Siddhartha gave the 4 noble truths, the core principle of Dhamma, Buddha Dhamma or Buddha's Dhamma. And the 4 principles are, we will see that a little later. Eventually, following those 4 principles, following Buddha Dhamma, after Sarnath, Siddhartha went place to place, from Rajagriha to Avanti state to Ujjain. He travelled a lot across the entire Gangetic plain. Buddhism's speciality was, it was actually a philosophy which rejected gender classification, class classification or casteism. So Buddhism neither had gender bias, Buddhism neither has class bias, Buddhism neither had caste. Everybody was equal. Equality was the central core of Buddhist religion. Equality was the central core of Buddhist religion. At the age of 80, that is, see, 35 years, Buddha became enlightened, right? For 45 years, he was traveling around the Gangetic plains. At the age of 80, he was visiting one of his disciples in Kushinagar. In this place, unfortunately, Buddha died due to food poisoning. He happened to have curd with pork, which led to food poisoning, and Buddha died. 80 years was his age at the time of his death. So he became enlightened at 35. He spread his message for 45 years. He left the household at 29 years. He was married at 18 years. Died at 80. Important numbers in Buddha's life: 18, 29, 35, 45 years, 80. Okay. After Buddha's death, basically Buddha's relics, Buddha's clothes, Buddha's used material, Buddha's cremation, after cremation, Buddha's ashes, Buddha's bones, all of these were collected into small boxes. Eventually, 9 stupas were built. Stupas were like a funeral mound like this. 9 stupas were built, where Buddha's relics and Buddha's bones are spread across 9 different stupas. Remember, stupas were built after the death of Buddha. They are a symbol of the death of Buddha. At the age of 80, when Buddha died, after that, from 483 BC and later, they started building different stupas across the country. Eventually, by the time of Guptas, see, Mauryas, for example, Mauryas in 321 BC to 185 BC. Guptas from 250 AD to 560 AD. After Guptas, Harsha. These people contributed extensively to the spread of Buddha or Buddhism, the Buddhist philosophy. And time and again, there have always been Chinese scholars who have come to this country, like Fa Hein during Chandragupta Vikramaditya's period, during Gupta period, Huensang during Harshavardhana's period, Singh after Harshavardhana. Time and again, even Pallavas contributed between about 3rd to 5th century AD. Even Pallavas attempted to spread Buddhism across the world. At its peak, Buddhism was the major religion not just in India but also in Central Asia and Europe. The entire Europe, Asia, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, India at their peak. Even when Buddhism declined in India because of Brahmanical revival approximately by 7th century AD, Buddhism did not decline in Southeast Asia and Asia. Buddhism did not decline here. Here it continued. Even today, Buddhism remains one of the most dominant religions in Southeast Asia and Asia. From Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam to even Inner Mongolia and China, Buddhism remains a very big religion as a philosophy, as a religion. Okay. And Buddhism's peak spread was between 480 AD to 400 BC. Early kings, even immediately after the death of Buddha, Kampusa, Kaundinya were fully supported by people of the Magadha state, of the Mauryan state. Even Ashoka took tremendous amount of efforts to actually spread Buddhism. And Ashoka is, in a way, the king because of whom Buddhism is so popular in the world today. There were 4 noble truths I told you. Dukkha. Dukkha means world is full of sorrows. Dukkha samudaya means desires cause sorrows. Dukkha nirodha, sorrows can be ended. Dukkha nirodhagami pratipada marga means one must follow the path to end dukkha. This basically was the noble truth which Buddha gave. The first sermon. The world is full of sorrow, dukkha, life is suffering, world is full of sorrow. Dukkha samudaya, if you have desires, you will have sorrows, because if your desire doesn't get fulfilled, then you will feel sorrow. Dukkha nirodha, one can actually end his sorrows. Dukkha nirodha gami pratipada marga. Basically, follow the noble path, follow the path, the eightfold path. He gave 8 rules. Buddha gave to the people to follow to end their sorrows. Ashta Anga Marga. And Buddha basically identified Nirvana as the final aim. Nirvana has been defined in multiple ways. The best way to example is, it's a state of bliss and calm, where people do not have any desires, do not have any aims, or at the same time they are neither happy nor sad nor depressed nor excited. Nirvana is a state of inner peace. State of inner peace. Buddha's life events have been identified like this. Buddha's birth, he is always identified as a bull. or a lotus. To determine Mahabhinishkramana means, remember the period when he left house at the age of 29 years? To determine that, they show it as a galloping horse, a jumping horse. Enlightenment means nirvana, which happened in Bodh Gaya at the age of 35. Nirvana. From there, he went to Sarnath Deer Park at the age of 35, gave the first sermon, 𝗪𝗁𝗁𝗁. Remember 𝗕𝗂𝗽𝗓𝗍 𝗪𝗁𝗁, where Buddha said you need to follow 8 rules. Those 8 rules are represented as an 8-spoke wheel. And last, Buddha's death is identified as parinirvana, generally represented as a stupa. Say this happens, this representative formation of Buddha's life happens because there are certain beliefs in Buddhism, certain schools, certain followers of Buddhism who do not represent Buddha like an idol, who do not go for Buddha as a god. For them, in their carvings, in their paintings, in their literature, Buddha's life and stages of Buddha's life are identified in these 5 different symbols. Where they use idols, they use. Where they don't use idols, they represent him this way. Okay. So in today's class, we've just discussed about introduction to Buddha. What was his background? He was born. What stage of life? What happened in Buddha's life? Buddha's symbols of Buddha's life. He's basically the beginning of Buddhism. Let us continue this in the next session, and we will see more details about Buddhism. Thank you. Bye-bye.